The maintenance tunnel led deeper into the station's core, away from the main corridors where Zephyrian patrols moved in predictable patterns. Jake crawled behind Collins, who navigated the narrow passages with the confidence of someone who had built and repaired every section of the station. Behind them, the other escaped humans followed in single file, moving as quietly as possible. "There," Collins whispered, pointing to a junction ahead. "That leads to the central computer core. But we'll have to go through a section there definitely." Monitoring, Jake studied the layout in his mind. How many guards? At least 6, probably more. They've got the main entrance covered, and there are sensors throughout that section. Dr. Rodriguez tapped Jake's shoulder. "I've been thinking about what Lisa said, about the bioelectric interference from their technology. If we can create enough electromagnetic disruption, we might be able to blind their sensors temporarily. How do we do that?" Jake asked. Collins smiled grimly. The station's power grid wasn't designed to handle Zephyrian technology. Their control systems are creating feedback loops in our electrical systems. If we overload the right circuits, we can cause a cascade failure that will knock out their sensors. "And probably kill the life support too," Captain Price added from behind them. "Only for a few minutes," Collins replied. "The emergency systems will kick in, but it'll give us a window to move." Jake considered the plan. It was risky, but they were running out of time. Through the ventilation system, they could hear alarms sounding as the Zephyrians discovered their escape. Soon the entire station will be flooded with search teams. "Do it," Jake decided. "But we need a distraction too. Something to draw their attention away from the computer core." "I have an idea," Dr. Webb said. "The research lab has experimental plasma generators. If I can reach them, I can create some very impressive explosions in the outer sections. Nothing dangerous, but loud enough to make them think we're trying to escape through the docking bays." Jake nodded. "Take 2 people with you? The rest of us will head for the computer core when Collins creates his electromagnetic pulse." They split up at the next junction, with Webb's team heading toward the research sections while Jake's group continued toward the station's heart. The tunnel grew warmer as they approached the core systems, and Jake could feel the vibration of massive computers processing data. Collins stopped at an access panel and began working with tools he had improvised from maintenance supplies. "This will take about 5 minutes," he whispered. "Once I trigger the overload, you'll have maybe 3 minutes before their systems reset." "What about you?" Jake asked. "I'll catch up. Someone needs to make sure the cascade doesn't spread too far, or we really will lose life support." Through the tunnel walls, they could hear the sound of running feet and shouting voices. The Zephyrians were mobilizing their forces to search for the escaped prisoners. Jake hoped Webb's distraction would work. A series of distant explosions answered his hopes. The plasma generators in the research lab were detonating in sequence, creating a light show that would be visible throughout the station. Almost immediately, Jake heard Zephyrian voices redirecting search teams toward the outer sections. "Perfect timing," Collins muttered, connecting 2 circuits that should never have been connected. "Here we go." The lights went out throughout this section of the station, and Jake felt the subtle change in air circulation that meant the life support systems had switched to emergency power. Collins had done it. The electromagnetic pulse had knocked out the Zephyrian sensor grid. "Move," Jake whispered, and they crawled quickly through the tunnel toward the computer core access hatch. The hatch opened into a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. Banks of computers lined the walls, their displays flickering with data streams. At the center of the room stood the main communication array, a collection of crystalline structures that could transmit messages across interstellar distances. But the room wasn't empty. 2 Zephyrian technicians stood at control stations, their pale faces illuminated by the screen glow. They turned as Jake and his team entered. Reaching for alarm controls, Captain Price moved first, tackling one technician before he could sound the alert. Dr. Rodriguez grabbed the other, using her knowledge of Zephyrian physiology to apply pressure to nerve clusters that would render him unconscious without permanent harm. How long before the sensors come back online? Jake asked. 2 minutes, maybe less, Rodriguez replied. Checking her captives to ensure they were merely unconscious, Jake approached the main communication console. The interface was a mixture of human and Zephyrian technology, with holographic displays showing fleet positions and tactical data. He could see the Zephyrian force heading toward Earth, but he could also see something else, human ships moving to intercept. Earth received the warning, he said with relief. Look at this. The fleet is mobilizing. Rodriguez joined him at the console, but they're outnumbered 3-1. The Zephyrians have more ships and better technology. Jake studied the tactical display more carefully. The human fleet was positioning itself in a defensive formation around Earth, but they were clearly outmatched. Unless something changed, the battle will be over quickly. We need to even the odds, Jake said. Can you access their fleet coordination system? Maybe, Rodriguez replied, her fingers moving over the holographic controls. Their command network is heavily encrypted, but the interface protocols are similar to what I've studied. The lights flickered as the electromagnetic pulse began to fade and Zephyrian systems started coming back online. Jake knew they had minutes at most before discovery. There, Rodriguez said, breaking through a layer of encryption. I'm in their tactical network. I can see their fleet communications. Jake leaned over her shoulder to read the data streams. Look at this. They're using a centralized command structure. Every ship in the fleet takes orders from War Commander. Vexto's flagship. That's a weakness, Rodriguez realized. If we can disrupt the command ship, the entire fleet will lose coordination. But how do we do that from here? Rodriguez's eyes lit up as she understood. Lisa said their neural networks can be overloaded by specific frequencies. If I can identify the command frequency and amplify it through this communication array, you could cause a feedback loop in their flagship systems, Jake finished. Do it. Rodriguez began working frantically at the controls, analyzing the Zephyrian communication protocols and searching for the specific frequency that controlled their neural networks. Behind them, the other humans kept watch at the entrances to the chamber. Got it, Rodriguez said. But I need more power to amplify the signal enough to reach their fleet. Jake looked around the chamber and saw what they needed. The station's main reactor. Can you redirect power from there? If someone can manually override the safety protocols in the reactor chamber, Rodriguez replied. But that's a suicide? Mission. The radiation levels will be lethal. Before Jake could respond, Collins appeared at the access hatch. The sensors are coming back online. We've got maybe 30 seconds before they find us. Jake made his decision. I'll go to the reactor chamber. Rodriguez, be ready to transmit the frequency as soon as I give you the power boost. Jake, you can't, Rodriguez protested. The radiation will kill you. Maybe, Jake replied. But if I don't try, Earth falls and billions die. That's not acceptable. He turned to leave, but Collins grabbed his arm. Wait, there might be another way. The station has environmental suits in the emergency lockers. They're designed to handle reactor maintenance. Will they protect against the radiation long enough? For a few minutes, maybe. It's better than going in unprotected. Jake nodded and ran toward the emergency lockers while the others continued, working at the communication console. Behind him, he could hear Zephyrian voices getting closer as their sensors reactivated and detected the intruders. The environmental suit was bulky and uncomfortable, but it gave him a chance of survival. As he sealed the helmet, Jake thought about what he was about to attempt. It was exactly the kind of illogical, desperate plan that Vexto said would never work, which was exactly why it might succeed. Jake entered the reactor chamber and immediately felt the oppressive weight of massive energies contained by magnetic fields. The reactor core pulsed with blue-white light, beautiful and deadly. At the control station, he found the manual override switches that would redirect the reactor's full output to the communication array. Through his suit radio, he heard Rodriguez's voice. "Jake, I'm ready. Are you in position?" "Affirmative," Jake replied, his hand on the override switch. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." He threw the switch, and the reactor's output surged through the station's power grid toward the communication array. Even through his suit's protection, Jake could feel the radiation washing over him like invisible fire. Warning alarms screamed as the reactor pushed beyond safe operating limits. In the computer core, Rodriguez transmitted the amplified frequency toward the Zephyrian fleet. The signal raced across space at the speed of light, carrying with it the potential to cripple the enemy's command structure. Jake watched the reactor displays as power levels climbed toward critical. He had maybe a minute before the reactor would automatically shut down to prevent a catastrophic explosion. But a minute might be enough. Asterisk, asterisk. The paralysis field flickered and died as the station's power grid fluctuated under Zephyrian control. Jake felt sensation return to his limbs like fire rushing through his veins. Around the room, other humans were stretching and moving carefully, testing their recovered mobility. The Zephyrians had made their first mistake by trusting too much in their technology. Vextil noticed a field failure immediately and barked orders in his own language. 3 Zephyrian soldiers entered the room carrying energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. Their pale faces showed no emotion as they took positions around the humans. "Move slowly and keep your hands visible," Vextil commanded in English. "Any sudden movements will be met with force." Jake looked around at his fellow humans and saw faces he recognized from the diplomatic corps and station security. Dr. Amy Rodriguez caught his eye from across the room. She was a xenobiologist who had spent years studying alien physiology. Next to her stood Chief Engineer Sam Collins, a man Jake knew from reputation as someone who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. "We're being relocated too. Holding cells," Jake said quietly to the group. "Stay alert and watch for opportunities." The Zephyrian soldiers herded the humans toward the exit, but Jake noticed that their movements were stiff and mechanical. They followed precise patterns that suggested they were thinking more like machines than living beings. This gave him an idea. As they walked through the station corridors, Jake observed everything. The Zephyrians had placed control devices at key intersections, but they had focused on major systems and ignored smaller maintenance panels. They were thinking logically about controlling the station, but they had missed the subtle details that a human engineer would notice. The holding area was in the station's lower section, where the artificial gravity was strongest. The cells were simple but effective, with energy barriers instead of physical doors. Jake found himself sharing a cell with Dr. Rodriguez and Chief Collins, while other humans were distributed among nearby cells. "They're making mistakes," Collins whispered. As soon as the guards moved away, "I saw at least 3 maintenance shafts they haven't secured, and their control grid has gaps." "What kind of gaps?" Jake asked. "They're using their own technology to interface with our systems, but the two aren't fully compatible. There are feedback loops and signal delays that they haven't accounted for." Dr. Rodriguez leaned closer. "I've been watching their soldiers. Their physiology is adapted for high-efficiency thinking, but it makes them inflexible. They can't improvise the way humans can." Jake nodded. "That's what I was hoping." Lisa mentioned that they see human unpredictability as a weakness, but it might be our greatest strength. "Who's Lisa?" Collins asked. "The Zephyrian infiltrator who's been posing as Ambassador Chim. She's been studying us, but I think she's learned more than she expected." Through the energy barrier of their cell, Jake could see other humans in adjacent cells. He recognized Captain Helen Price from Station Security and Dr. Marcus Webb from the Research Division. All of them were watching and waiting for a chance to act. "We need to communicate with the other cells," Jake said. "Do either of you know Morse code?" "I do," Rodriguez replied. "But they'll see us tapping on the walls." Collins smiled grimly. "Not if we use the ventilation system. Sound travels through the air ducts, and if we tap in rhythm, it'll carry to the other cells. Jake positioned himself near the air vent while Collins and Rodriguez kept watch. Using his knuckles, he began, capping out a simple message in Morse code. The sound was quiet but clear, and within minutes, he heard responses from other cells. The message he sent was basic, but important. Stay ready. Watch guards. Find weakness. Over the next hour, they learned that there were 15 humans in the holding area, including several with technical expertise and military training. Captain Price had managed to observe the guard rotation schedule, while Dr. Webb had noticed that the Zephyrian technology was creating electromagnetic interference with some of the station's systems. The interference might be something we can use, Rodriguez whispered. If their control signals are being disrupted, there might be windows where we can act. Collins had been studying the energy barrier of their cell. These barriers are impressive, but they're not perfect. They're designed to contain humans based on our normal physical capabilities, but they might not account for what humans can do when we work together. What do you mean? Jake asked. The barrier reads bioelectric signatures. It's designed to stop one human from passing through. But if multiple humans act in perfect coordination, we might be able to confuse the sensors. Jake was about to respond when the lights dimmed and the station shuddered. Something was happening in another part of the facility. Through the communication system, they could hear Zephyrian voices speaking rapidly in their own language. That sounded like an alert, Rodriguez said. Something's gone wrong with their plan. Minutes later, Lisa appeared in the corridor outside their cells. She was no longer wearing the emerald dress, instead dressed in a form-fitting suit that clearly marked her as Zephyrian military, but her face showed emotions that seemed very human. Commander Martinez, she said, approaching his cell. I need to speak with you. I'm listening. Lisa glanced around to make sure they were alone, then activated a device that created a privacy field around them. There's been a development. A human patrol ship detected the fleet movement toward Earth and transmitted a warning before it was destroyed. Jake felt his heart race. How long does Earth have? 12 hours, maybe less. But that's not why I'm here. Lisa's expression was troubled. War Commander Vexto is angry about the early detection. He's decided to accelerate the timeline and eliminate all human prisoners, including us. Yes, he believes that keeping humans alive is too risky now that Earth has been warned. Jake studied her face carefully. But you disagree. I've been thinking about what you said. About human sacrifice and friendship and the things that make your species strong. During my infiltration, I witnessed things that I didn't understand before, such as I saw a maintenance worker risk his life to save a colleague who had fallen into a reactor shaft. I watched parents put themselves in danger to protect children who weren't even their own. I observed humans making decisions that benefited others at their own expense, Jake nodded. And now you're questioning whether your people are right about us. I'm questioning everything, Lisa admitted. My programming tells me that emotion is weakness and logic is strength. But I've seen humans accomplish impossible things through determination and creativity. So help us. Lisa was quiet for a long moment. If I help you escape, I'll be betraying my own species. I'll be marked as a traitor and hunted for the rest of my life. But you'll be doing what you know is right. How can I be sure? How do I know that human values are better than Zephyrian ones? Jake stepped closer to the energy barrier. You can't be sure. That's the point. Humans make decisions based on hope and faith and the belief that things can be better. We don't always know we're right, but we try anyway. Lisa touched the control device, and the energy barrier flickered. I can disable the barriers for 60 seconds before the security system detects the breach. After that, you'll have maybe 5 minutes before the guards arrive. That's enough, Jake said. What about you? I'll try to delay Vextel and give you more time. But Jake, even if you escape the holding area, you're still trapped on the station. The Zephyrians control everything. Let us worry about that, Collins interjected. We know this station better than they do. Lisa nodded and moved to a control panel. When I disable the barriers, head for Section 7. It's the least heavily guarded, and there are maintenance tunnels that lead to the station's core systems. What's in the core? Jake asked. The main computer and communication array. If you can reach it, you might be able to send a warning to your fleet or disrupt Zephyrian operations. Rodriguez stepped forward. Lisa, why are you doing this? Really? Lisa paused with her hand over the control panel. Because I've learned that being right isn't the same as being logical. And because I've discovered that some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't prove they're the best choice. She pressed the controls, and every energy barrier in the holding area disappeared at once. Go, and good luck. Jake led the way out of the cell as 15 humans emerged from their prisons. The corridor was empty, but they could hear Zephyrian voices in the distance. They had minutes at most before their escape was discovered. This way, Collins whispered, leading them toward a maintenance hatch. Stay quiet and move fast. As they climbed into the maintenance tunnel, Jake looked back and saw Lisa watching them. She raised her hand in a small gesture of farewell, then turned and walked away. Jake wondered if he would ever see her again. The tunnel was narrow and dark, lit only by emergency lighting. But it felt like freedom after the energy cells. As they crawled through the station's hidden passages, Jake began to formulate a plan. The Zephyrians thought they had won, but they had underestimated human determination and ingenuity. Now it was time to show them what humans could really do when their backs were against the wall. The lights in the reception hall suddenly changed from warm white to a harsh blue color. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation in his arms and legs, and he realized that some kind of energy field was being activated. Around the room, humans began to look confused and alarmed as they felt the same sensation. Paralysis field, Vextol explained calmly. A simple precaution. You will not be harmed if you do not resist. Jake tried to move his arm but found that his muscles would not respond properly. He could still breathe and speak, but his body felt heavy and sluggish. The other humans in the room were experiencing the same effect, their faces showing growing panic as they realized they were trapped. You planned this from the beginning, Jake said, his voice slightly slurred from the paralysis field. Of course, Vextol replied. Did you think we would enter negotiations without proper preparation? We have been studying your species for years, Commander. We know how you think, how you react, how you fight. This outcome was inevitable. Lisa stepped away from Jake, and he saw that she was not affected by the paralysis field. Her dress continued to shimmer and shift, but now he could see that it was more than just fabric. Thin lines of light ran through the material, connecting the small devices that were almost invisible against the emerald color. I'm sorry, Lisa said quietly. I really am sorry it has to be this way. The station's communication system crackled to life, and a voice spoke in rapid Zephyrian. Jake could not understand the words, but the tone was urgent and official. Lisa touched the device on her wrist and responded in the same language. What's happening? Jake asked. My people are taking control of the station, Lisa explained. The paralysis field is being extended to all sections. Human personnel are being secured for questioning. Jake felt a surge of anger that helped him fight against the paralysis field. Questioning about what? Military positions, defensive capabilities, the locations of your colonies, Vextol answered. We need to know where to strike for maximum effect. Through the large windows of the reception hall, Jake could see shapes moving in the darkness of space. At first they looked like stars, but as his eyes adjusted, he realized they were ships. Dozens of them, all moving in formation toward the station. The fleet, he said. Part of it, Vextol confirmed. The main force is already moving toward Earth. This is just a support group to handle the station and any human reinforcements that might arrive. Jake tried again to move his arms, focusing all his willpower on breaking free from the paralysis field. His fingers twitched slightly, but that was all he could manage. Around the room, Other humans were having the same problem. A few of the stronger ones could move their heads or shift their weight, but none could walk or reach for weapons. "Your field won't hold us forever," Jake said. "It doesn't need to," Vexto replied. "Once we have the information we need, you will be transferred to holding cells. After Earth falls, you will be relocated to a colony world where you can live out your lives in peace. As prisoners, as a protected species. We are not cruel, Commander. We simply believe in order and efficiency. Humans are too chaotic to be allowed to expand freely, but you have value as individuals." Lisa walked to the window and looked out. At the Zephyrian ships, the scout vessels are reporting that the station's defenses have been neutralized. No human ships are in the immediate area. "Good," Vexto said. "Begin the detailed scans. I want to know everything about human technology and tactics." Jake watched as Lisa touched her dress and the fabric began to glow more brightly. Information flowed across the surface in patterns of light that hurt to look at directly. She was downloading data from the station's computers, pulling out years of human military records and scientific research. "You're making a mistake," Jake said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "You think you understand humans, but you don't. You're about to learn why we're so dangerous." Vexto's large eyes fixed on Jake with interest. "Explain. You're thinking. Like Zephyrians. You see a problem and you apply logic to solve it. But humans don't work that way. We're not logical. We're emotional, creative, and stubborn. When you attack Earth, you won't be facing an organized military response. You'll be facing billions of angry humans who will fight with everything they have. Emotion is weakness," Vexto said. "Anger makes beings careless and predictable." "Does it?" Jake asked. "Tell me, War Commander, what would you do if someone attacked your homeworld and threatened your family?" For the first time, Jake saw uncertainty in the alien's expression. "I would respond according to established protocols." "No, you wouldn't. You'd be angry, and you want revenge. And you keep fighting until either you won or you died trying." Lisa turned away from the window, and Jake saw that she was listening intently to their conversation. "He has a point, War Commander. During my infiltration, I observed human behavior patterns that don't match our predictions, such as their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others, their ability to find solutions that make no logical sense but somehow work, their refusal to surrender even when defeat is certain." Vexto waved dismissively. "Individual heroics cannot stand against superior technology and numbers. Can't they?" Jake asked. "Lisa, tell him about the Martian colony crisis. Tell him how one human with a cargo ship ended a war." Lisa hesitated, and Jake could see the conflict in her expression. "Commander Harrison used a transport vessel as a weapon, filled with mining explosives. The rebel fleet was destroyed because they didn't anticipate such an illogical tactic." "Illogical," Vexto repeated. "Exactly. We have studied human military history. We know about your unconventional tactics. Our computers have analyzed thousands of scenarios and developed countermeasures." "Your computers," Jake said. "That's the problem right there. You're trying to use logic to predict illogical behavior. It can't be done." The station shuddered slightly, and Jake realized that more Zephyrian ships were docking. Through the communication system, he could hear orders being given in the alien language. The occupation was proceeding exactly as planned. "You're too confident," Jake continued. "You think you've won before the battle even starts. That's going to be your downfall." Lisa approached Jake, her expression troubled. "What do you mean?" "I mean that right now, somewhere in human space, there's a communications officer who's noticed that this station has gone quiet, and that officer is going to report it to his superiors. And those superiors are going to investigate. We have accounted for that possibility," Vexto said. "Any human ships that arrive will be captured or destroyed. Will they?" Jake asked. "What if they don't come to fight? What if they come to rescue?" What if they're willing to sacrifice themselves to warn Earth? Jake saw Lisa's eyes widen slightly as she understood his meaning. A suicide run. They would destroy themselves to send a message. Zephyrians would never do such a thing, Vexto said. It makes no logical sense. That's exactly why it would work, Jake replied. You can't defend against tactics that make no sense to you. The paralysis field was beginning to weaken slightly, and Jake found that he could move his fingers more freely. Around the room, other humans were also showing signs of recovery. The field was designed to work on human nervous systems, but human bodies were adaptable. They were building resistance. The field is losing effectiveness, Lisa observed. Increase the power, Vextor ordered. That could cause permanent damage to their nervous systems. Then we will question them quickly. Jake saw his chance. Lisa, you said you learned about human friendship and sacrifice. You've seen that. Our emotions make us stronger, not weaker. Are you really going to help destroy something you've come to understand and respect? Lisa stood frozen between Jake and Vexto, her face showing the internal battle she was fighting. I have. My orders. Orders from people who don't understand what you've learned, Jake pressed. You know humans now. You know we're not just another species to be conquered. We're capable of things your people can't even imagine. Enough, Vexto said sharply. Agent Lisa, proceed with the data extraction. We have wasted enough time. On human philosophy. Lisa looked at Jake for a long moment, and he saw something change in her expression. War Commander, I request permission to speak with you privately. Why? Because I have learned things during my infiltration that may affect our strategy. Vexto studied her carefully. Very well, but make it quick. As they moved to the far side of the room, Jake concentrated on fighting the paralysis field. His training kicked in, and he began using breathing techniques to increase his circulation and nerve response. Around him, other humans were doing the same thing, working together without words to overcome the alien technology. The station shuddered again, and Jake realized that the Zephyrian occupation was nearly complete. Soon they would have control of all human personnel and equipment. But Jake was beginning to see the flaws in their plan. The aliens were so focused on logic and efficiency that they couldn't see the chaos coming. They had captured the humans, but they hadn't broken them. And somewhere in the darkness of space, help was coming. Jake smiled grimly as he felt strength returning to his arms and legs. The Zephyrians were about to learn why humans were called the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Zephyrian leader stopped in front of Lisa and spoke in his own language. His voice was low and musical, with sounds that human throats could barely make. Lisa responded fluently, her words flowing like water over stones. Jake had studied basic Zephyrian for months, but he could only catch a few words of their conversation. Jake watched the exchange carefully, noting the formal gestures and the way both beings held themselves. The Zephyrian leader was tall even by his species. Standards, with skin so pale it was almost white. His eyes were large and dark, taking in everything around him with quick, calculating glances. His uniform was made of a material that seemed to shift between silver and gold depending on the light. Lisa turned back to Jake and the other humans present. War Commander Vextol welcomes everyone to this historic meeting. He expresses hope that today will mark the beginning of a new era of cooperation between our species. The formal introductions continued for several minutes. Each member of the Zephyrian delegation was presented, their names and titles spoken in both languages. Jake memorized each face and tried to read their expressions, but the aliens remained carefully neutral. Their large eyes revealed nothing of their thoughts or feelings. When the introductions were complete, Lisa guided everyone to a large circular table that had been set up in the center of the room. The seating arrangement had been planned carefully, with humans and Zephyrians alternating around the table. Jake found himself directly across from War Commander Vextol, with Lisa to his right. As they settled into their seats, Jake noticed that Lisa's dress continued to shimmer and change. The fabric seemed to have a life of its own, moving in patterns. that didn't quite match her movements. When she reached for a glass of water, the sleeve of her dress caught the light in a way that made it look almost transparent for a moment. Commander Martinez, Vexto said in accented but clear English, "We have heard much about human military capabilities. Your species has a reputation for being unpredictable in combat." Jake chose his words carefully. "We prefer to think of ourselves as adaptable. We face each situation with fresh thinking and creative solutions." "Creative," Vexto repeated, as if testing the word. "This is not a concept that translates well into our language. We prefer tried and proven methods." Lisa leaned forward slightly. "Commander, perhaps you could explain how human creativity has helped in past conflicts." War Commander Vexto is very interested in military strategy. Again, Jake felt that odd sensation that something was not quite right. Lisa's question seemed designed to get him to reveal specific information about human military tactics. But she was supposed to be on his side, working to build trust between the species. "I think we should focus on peaceful cooperation," Jake said diplomatically. "Both our species have much to gain from working together." Vexto's large eyes fixed on Jake with laser focus. "Peace requires understanding. We must know each other's capabilities to build proper trust." The conversation continued for another hour, with both sides dancing around sensitive topics. The Zephyrians asked careful questions about human technology, population, and industrial capacity. Jake provided general answers while trying to learn more about Zephyrian society and motivations. Throughout the discussion, Jake kept noticing small things about Lisa that bothered him. Her knowledge of human customs was perfect, but sometimes she paused before using common expressions, as if translating them in her mind. When she laughed at a joke, it sounded slightly forced. And that dress continued to shimmer and shift in ways that no normal fabric should. During a break in the formal talks, Lisa excused herself and walked to the refreshment table. Jake followed her, using the opportunity to speak privately. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" She turned to face him, and for just a moment, Jake saw something flicker in her eyes. It was gone so quickly he might have imagined it, but it looked almost like fear. "Of course, Commander. What's on your mind?" "Your dress," Jake said quietly. "The fabric is unusual. I've never seen anything like it." Lisa's hand moved unconsciously to smooth the emerald material. "It's a gift from a friend, made with some new synthetic fibers. Very advanced technology." "It's beautiful," Jake said, "but it seems to be scanning the room. The way it catches light, the patterns it makes. It's almost like it's taking pictures." Lisa's smile never wavered, but Jake saw her shoulders tense slightly. "You have quite an imagination, Commander." "It's just fabric." "Is it?" Jake stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Because I'm starting to think there's a lot more going on here than peace negotiations." For a long moment, Lisa stared at him without speaking. Around them, the reception continued with quiet conversations between humans and Zephyrians. The station's air recyclers hummed softly, and somewhere in the distance, Jake could hear the sound of docking procedures as other ships arrived. "You're very observant," Lisa said finally. "Too observant for your own good. What does that mean?" Lisa glanced around the room, checking to make sure no one was listening. Then she looked back at Jake, and her expression had changed completely. The warm, diplomatic smile was gone, replaced by something colder and more calculating. "It means, Commander Martinez, that you figured out something you weren't supposed to figure out." Jake felt his heart rate increase. His hand moved instinctively toward the place where his sidearm would normally be, but of course he was unarmed. This was supposed to be a peaceful diplomatic meeting. "You're not human," he said quietly. "No," Lisa replied. "I'm not." The admission hung between them like a charged particle field. Jake's mind raced through the implications. If Lisa wasn't human, then who was she? And what did that mean for the negotiations? "You're Zephyrian," he said. "Very good, though not entirely correct." Lisa's voice had changed subtly, taking on some of the musical quality that Jake had noticed in Vextol's speech. I am Zephyrian, but I am also more than that. This body, this appearance, it's all carefully constructed. Biomimetic technology that your species hasn't even dreamed of yet. Jake looked at her dress again, seeing it with new understanding. The fabric, it's not just scanning the room. It's part of you, part of my equipment, yes. It's been recording everything since I arrived on this station. Security protocols, defensive systems, the layout of human ships. Everything we need to know. For what? Lisa's expression softened slightly, and Jake saw what might have been genuine regret in her eyes. For the attack, Commander. There was never going to be a peace treaty. This was always about gathering intelligence. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. Attack on what? On Earth, on all human colonies. Your species has been identified as a potential threat to Zephyrian expansion. The logical solution is to eliminate that threat before it becomes too great. You're talking about genocide. We're talking about survival. The Zephyrian Empire has existed for thousands of years by being practical about threats. Humans reproduce quickly, adapt rapidly, and refuse to follow logical patterns. You're dangerous precisely because you're unpredictable. Jake's mind raced. He had to warn someone, had to get word to the human fleet. But he was trapped in a locked room with enemy agents, and no one knew what was really happening. How long do we have? He asked. The fleet is already in position. They're waiting for my signal that the intelligence gathering is complete. Lisa looked genuinely sad. I'm sorry, Jake. I really am. Under different circumstances, I think I might have liked your species. You still can, Jake said urgently. You don't have to go through with this. Help us instead. Lisa shook her head. You don't understand. I'm not just disguised as a human. I'm programmed to think like one, to feel like one. But underneath all that, I'm still Zephyrian. I still believe in logic and order and the survival of my people. But you're having doubts, Jake pressed. I can see it in your eyes. You've learned something about humanity that your programmers didn't expect. Lisa was quiet for a moment, and Jake saw conflict in her expression. You're right, I have learned things. Your capacity for friendship, for sacrifice, for love. These are not weaknesses as we were taught. They're strengths that we don't understand. Then help us understand each other. This doesn't have to end in war. Before Lisa could respond, War Commander Vextol appeared beside them. He spoke quickly in Zephyrian, his tone sharp and commanding. Lisa responded in the same language, but Jake could hear uncertainty in her voice. Vextol's large eyes fixed on Jake with cold calculation. Commander Martinez, I believe you have learned something that you should not have learned. Jake straightened his shoulders and met the alien's gaze. I've learned that Zephyrians are not as honorable as they claim to be. Honor is a human concept, Vextol replied. We prefer survival. Jake Martinez stepped through the airlock of Haven's Rest with his dress uniform crisp and his mind focused on the task ahead. The space station hummed with quiet activity as dozens of different species moved through its corridors. This was neutral territory, a place where enemies could meet without fear of attack. Today it would host the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. The Zephyrian Empire had reached out to humanity with an offer of alliance. After decades of Cold War and border skirmishes, they wanted peace. Jake had been chosen to represent Earth because of his military record and his ability to stay calm under pressure. The Admiralty had briefed him for weeks about Zephyrian culture, their social structures, and their way of thinking. Everything had to go perfectly. Jake made his way through the station's main corridor, passing alien beings he had only seen in intelligence reports. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians with their forearms moved gracefully past shorter, stockier Corvan traders with their rock-like skin. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric needs of so many species. The smell was strange, but not unpleasant. like ozone mixed with something floral. The diplomatic reception hall was located in the station's central hub, where the artificial gravity was most stable. Jake checked his chronometer and saw that he was exactly on time. The doors to the hall stood open, revealing a large circular room with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Soft lighting created a warm atmosphere, and tables with refreshments lined the walls. Jake entered the room and immediately noticed her. She stood near the far wall, speaking quietly with a group of station personnel. Her emerald dress seemed to catch the light in ways that made it shimmer like water. The fabric moved with her as she gestured, and Jake found himself staring. She was beautiful, but there was something more than that. She carried herself with confidence and grace that commanded attention. When she turned and saw him, she smiled and excused herself from the group. As she walked toward him, Jake noticed how the dress seemed to flow around her like liquid silk. It was cut in a style that was both elegant and practical, with long sleeves and a high neckline that spoke of diplomatic formality. But the color and the way it moved made it stunning. "Commander Martinez," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Ambassador Lisa Chun. I'll be assisting with the negotiations today." Jake took her hand and shook it firmly. Her grip was strong and confident. "Ambassador Chun, it's a pleasure to meet you. I've read your reports on Zephyrian culture. They were very helpful." "Thank you," she replied. "I've spent considerable time studying their society. Understanding their perspective will be crucial for these talks." Jake found himself still looking at her dress. The way it caught the light was mesmerizing, and he realized he was being rude by staring. "I have to say, you look gorgeous in that dress. The color is perfect on you." Lisa's smile broadened, and for a moment Jake thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. "Thank you, Commander. That's very kind of you to say." She moved past him toward the entrance of the hall, and Jake heard the soft sound of the door mechanism engaging. When he turned to look, he saw that she had quietly locked the door. The action was subtle, almost casual, but it caught his attention. "Security precaution," she explained when she noticed his questioning look. "These negotiations are sensitive. We don't want any unexpected interruptions." Jake nodded, though something about her explanation felt incomplete. He had attended many diplomatic functions, and locking the doors was unusual unless there was a specific threat. But Lisa seemed relaxed and confident, so he pushed the thought aside. The reception hall was now sealed, with about 30 beings inside. Most were station personnel and diplomatic staff, but Jake recognized several high-ranking officials from various species. The Zephyrian delegation had not yet arrived, which was normal. They preferred to make an entrance after everyone else was settled. Lisa guided Jake to a small table near the center of the room where refreshments waited. The selection included foods from a dozen different worlds, carefully chosen to be safe for most species. Jake picked up a glass of something that looked like wine, but tasted like berries mixed with starlight. "Tell me about your impressions of Zephyrian culture," Lisa said, settling into a chair across from him. "What did you find most interesting in your studies?" Jake considered the question carefully. Their emphasis on logic and order is fascinating. Every decision is made based on careful analysis and rational thinking. They don't seem to understand human emotions, or why we make choices based on feelings rather than pure logic. "That's very perceptive," Lisa replied. "They view emotional decision-making as a weakness. To them, the fact that humans can act irrationally makes us unpredictable and potentially dangerous. But that's also what makes us creative," Jake said. "We can think outside the box, find solutions that pure logic might miss." Lisa leaned forward slightly, her eyes bright with interest. "Can you give me an example? Something specific from human military history, perhaps?" The question struck Jake as odd. Lisa should know human military history as well as he did if she was truly an expert on interspecies relations. But her interest seemed genuine, so he decided to share. "During the Martian colony crisis 20 years ago, our ships were outmatched by the rebel forces. Logic said we should retreat and wait for reinforcements. Instead, Commander Harrison decided to use a cargo hauler as a decoy. He filled it with mining charges and flew it straight at the rebel flagship. The rebels saw a defenseless transport and ignored it until it was too late. Pure logic would never have suggested using a cargo ship as a weapon. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. And this Harrison, was he considered a hero for this action? He saved 3 colonies and ended the war 6 months early. Of course he was a hero. Jake paused, studying Lisa's face. Why do you ask? I'm trying to understand how humans define heroism. The Zephyrians have very different concepts of honor and sacrifice. Before Jake could respond, the lights in the hall dimmed slightly, and a chime sounded. The station's communication system activated, and a voice announced that the Zephyrian delegation was requesting permission to dock. Lisa stood and smoothed her dress, the fabric shimmering as it moved. They're here, she said. Are you ready? Commander? Jake stood and adjusted his uniform. As ready as I'll ever be. Lisa walked to the center of the room and raised her voice slightly. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings, the Zephyrian delegation will be joining us momentarily. Please remember that this is a historic moment for all our species. Jake watched as the various beings in the room arranged themselves in a formal pattern. The station personnel moved to the walls while the diplomatic staff formed a loose circle in the center. Everything was proceeding according to protocol, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right. Lisa returned to his side, and again he noticed how her dress seemed to catch and reflect the light in unusual ways. The fabric looked almost alive, shifting and changing as she moved. He had never seen anything quite like it. Commander, Lisa said quietly, there's something I need to tell you before they arrive. Jake turned to face her fully. What is it? She hesitated for a moment, and Jake saw something in her expression that he couldn't quite identify. Fear? Regret? Before she could answer, the airlock chimed again, and the Zephyrian delegation entered the hall. The aliens were tall and thin, with pale skin and large dark eyes. They moved with precise, calculated steps, their expressions unreadable. Their leader, identifiable by the intricate patterns on his uniform, approached the center of the room. Lisa stepped forward to greet them, and Jake noticed that her movements had become somehow more fluid, more graceful than before. She spoke to the Zephyrian leader in their own language, her pronunciation perfect. Jake prepared himself for the most important negotiation of his career, unaware that everything he thought he knew was about to change.